So we're moving. There's a bit of a flavour for the day. We're moving into some of the. Oh, sorry. Oh. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're trying to cover the whole spectrum of topics today, from heart to brain. So I have lots of images in my head from that presentation. Thank you so much, Jim. And so are we having a clap as well? Okay, yes. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Our next speaker, and she'll be able to adapt, Jim. It's okay about the timing. I'm going to do a very short ritual, which I'm going to cut short as well. So we're okay. No panic. And Caroline Lacuto will be our next speaker. Caroline has been involved in lots of communities. She's currently the Vice President of Co-Housing Canberra, but is also working on the Eltham Co-Housing Project in Melbourne. And Caroline was the person who moved the motion that created demonstration housing here in the ACT, which has kick-started a lot of projects, including the Stellulata project. So welcome, Caroline.
Okay, well, yeah, hopefully that's right. Yeah, as Fiona said, I've been involved in an awful lot of intentional communities, the former ones in Bega, and currently Coordination Co-op, which is, of course, the greatest co-op in Nimbin, and, as has been mentioned, Boham Street, a co-housing development in progress in Eltham. I'm a member of the previous co-housing group in Canberra, which was called Canberra Co-Housing. I always have to concentrate. We had Canberra Co-Housing, now we have Co-Housing Canberra. And I was the chair of the ACT Legislative Assembly and Planning Committee. The most important thing to remember at this point, of course, is that we are not the first inhabitants here. This land was the home to the Namadgi and the Ngunnawal people, who lived a vastly more sustainable and cooperative life than we do. Now, cooperative intentional communities are not new to Canberra. As Fiona pointed out at the beginning, here in ANU, we're in a hall of residence. This is an intentional community. You have to be a student to get into it. You know, there's a number of criteria, and it's probably, in today's terminology, it's more co-living than co-housing, insofar as everyone here is basically tenants. They call themselves students, but they're, or residents, but they're tenants. But as well as all of this, there are two particular 1970s medium density developments in Canberra, which are Urambi and Wyballina Grove. Wyballina Grove in Belco and Urambi out in Canberra. Urambi is probably the closest to co-housing insofar as it does have a community centre, it's got a swimming pool, it's got a lot of, but all of them have got a lot of community space, and they were built to be communities, they were built to be affordable communities, and they're both flourishing now. So, as the topic of my conversation is about planning, I thought I'd sort of talk a bit about what is planning. Planning's pretty simple. It's just some of the rules that we need so that we can work out how to live together from a physical point of view. We've got to plan where the roads are going to go. We've got to plan where the sewage infrastructure is going to go. We're going to plan whether we want the buildings to be 1-storey or 10-storey or whatever. And it's been alluded to a bit by some earlier speakers, but I think a thing we should remember is planning is inherently political. There are winners and losers. It's not totally accidental that we don't have affordable housing in Canberra or virtually anywhere in Australia. I mean, there are some physical constraints, but it isn't, this is partially a social construct as well. And our planning system tends to privilege the people who already have privilege. That's a whole other conversation we could have over dinner, but that's sort of how I see it anyway. Now, the other thing, one of the most important things the planning system does, it provides the rules for the title, for the ownership of land. And we've talked a little bit about finance already, but the basic thing in finance, one of the basic things in finance for any development is who and what do you actually own? Who owns, if it's going to be on a bit of land, who owns that bit of land? What owns that bit of land? And there are many different ways of organising it, but land ownership has always been regarded as incredibly important, and every government has some sort of lands and titles offices. They're usually called lands and titles offices, and the planning system has the rules. In the ACT, as George mentioned, and all of you who are ACT residents hopefully know, we have a leasehold system. We don't legally own the land, we lease it from the Commonwealth Government. And if we had lots of time, I'll talk to you about why it was done that way, but I don't have that amount of time. Unit title is the other thing that's likely to be relevant to people doing co-housing. Unit title is where you have one big lease, one big ownership, and then it's divided up into units, and that each unit is going to be, well, if it's a Class A unit title, it's A for apartments, it'll be apartment, as George's pictures of Looney, and if it's Class B, it'll be a townhouse. In other words, every unit's got a bit of ground, and let's move to my next page. The owners own the units, and they have common property as well. The common property is owned in common, and they are called an owners' corporation. There are basic rules that are set for the owners' corporation, for body corporates in all states. This is because everywhere has a lot of them, and as they're bunches of people who may not have a lot in common apart from the fact they all live next to each other, it's really important to have rules which give you at least the bottom line for decision making and prevent the most egregious exploitation. I only can say the most egregious because there are still plenty of body corporates that don't work quite as well as you would like them to, but you have at least got a kind of baseline, reasonably sort of fair way of doing things. One of the most important things it does, though, is an owners' corporation can't restrict who you sell your unit to. And this is really important if what you're trying to do is create a community where there are entrance requirements to your community. Because if you've got a body corporate, a conventional body corporate, under conventional rules, you're not going to be able to say, oh, you can't join our community because we all decided that it'll be a community for survivors of domestic violence. You've had a wonderful, privileged life, and so thanks, but no thanks. Or whatever it is that you want to be your common feature. You can't do that. Which is also really important from a finance point of view, because I'll talk to that more about in the next screen, but yeah, the owners' corporation administers the common property, and most owners' corporations will employ a management firm to do the admin. But we need to remember that is a choice. You don't have to do that. A body corporate is an organisation which is run by the owners, and they can just subcontract as much as that as they feel like, or as little as that as they feel like. And typically small body corporates tend to not subcontract an awful lot. Yes, the ownership of your property is incredibly important. If you're going to borrow money, which most developments are, you're probably going to borrow and you're probably going to use that property as a security. So who on earth owns it? That's crucial to borrowing money. It's also incredibly crucial to how you exit the project. The community I was first a member of, Tunnable Falls at Nimbin, it's a cooperative, and the land we're on is owned as a multiple occupancy. I won't talk about multiple occupancies because unless someone's particularly interested, you can't do them in the ACT, and you can't do them anymore in a lot of places in the New South Wales. But the big problem, we were young in our 20s. Our exit strategy was eventually we were going to die, and we worked out where the cemetery was going to be. But that isn't always the way you leave. And so ownership is really important in terms of thinking about people may be there for some time, and then their needs may change, and they may want to be somewhere else, and they may need to be somewhere else, taking out some money that they've put into this development for their next bit. So you normally have one owner per title, but you don't have to. The other thing that's very, very common for couples is tenants in common or joint tenants. Or you can have your one title owned by one entity, and that entity has multiple people. Like I was talking about where I lived, it was a cooperative. Quite commonly, it's a company, and I believe Stellulata is owned. They're nodding. I'm correct. Stellulata is owned by a company, and if you do those things, then all the governance issues get stuck within the company or the co-op. They're not. You don't have body corporate rules. You work out how those structures work. It can be hard to finance though, because as I mentioned, the company or the co-op will be able to make rules as to who can or can't buy shares and on what terms, and so you're probably unlikely to find a bank that wishes to become involved in that. Dual occupancies are also fairly common. As I said, the default is one occupancy per title. Dual occupancy is two occupants per title, but only one title. The ACT allows them but doesn't really encourage them. New South Wales is much more enthusiastic about them. In the ACT, you can own a unit title, the blocks in part of the ACT, i.e. not RZ1, which I'll show you a map about that. Oh, here's some pretty pictures of dual occupancies. The one with the red brick building and then the tin one, that's an upmarket architect designed. The one next to it is one that a friend of mine is putting in his backyard because he's got 1,000 square metres. That's a kit home. The huge thing at the bottom is a brand new house you can get a project builder to build, and they'll build you as a dual occupancy in effect to begin with, because they have become incredibly popular as more economic ways of building in our existing urban areas. Now, I'm now going on to sort of the real subject, I guess, of my talk, which is planning issues for co-housing. And I should stress, I'm not talking about general planning issues in Canberra. I mean, I could talk for weeks on that. I'm not doing that. If it's an issue for every development, I'm probably not going to talk about it. And I'm also basically talking about if you want your development to basically follow the planning rules and be in a position that you can probably reasonably sell it at some time in the future. There's an awful lot you can do that's quite usable and livable and will work and is not exactly following the planning rules, but that's not the subject of this talk. What I've got there is a map of Canberra. Now, you can't read it, but what you can hopefully do is see that the urban area, most of it is a slightly browny yellow. That slightly browny yellow is RZ1, which equals suburban, which equals only one title. That is 80% of the urban built-up area of Canberra. So that is your number 1, 2 and 3 planning issue if you want to have a co-housing development. It means that you may have that nice block that you inherited from your parents that's nice and big, but you're not building legally your co-housing development there because you can't subdivide it. You can't have more than one, probably two occupancies on it anyway. Well, I will tell you I certainly have tried. And I'll talk a bit more about what is going to happen. But now this is a picture here of two medium density developments. The boring one on, which I'm not sure if it's right or left, the one that says 99 on it, whether it's right or left for you, I live in that development. The one on the other side that's pretty and colourful, that's a design which Co-Housing Canberra put in when we were applying for demonstration housing. And so I can point out the planning issues for co-housing in Canberra and everywhere else. If you look at the development that I live in, you can see that basically the only common open space is paved. It's entirely its driveway. So we've got lots of driveway and every single residence has a car park. Your number one issue is going to be car parking. Nobody in Canberra or anywhere else, in my experience, is happy to have a development next door to them that doesn't have enough car parking, because unfortunately an awful lot of people have found from bitter experience that it ends up just with the cars all in the road next to them, and that is the number one planning issue. Well, apart from, if you take out RZ1, then it's number two planning issue, and it's an issue not just the amount of planning, it's amount of parking, it's where you put the parking, because like we've got our parking all actually next to our dwelling. We walk straight in. Brilliant from a planning point of view. The other one, as you see, does in fact have some parking, not enough according to the rules, but the parking that it does have is not very close to about half of the units there. So that is, that would not meet the planning rules for sure for parking. The other thing is this: the pretty co-housing one has got lots of open space. But what it hasn't got is a lot of private open space. And we have rules basically to make higher quality housing that say that multi-unit developments have to have a certain amount of private open space. And that is a real issue. If you end up with your private open space, we say, as I've seen plenty of them, with 6 foot high ColourBond walls around them. We've got a 5 foot high brick walls around ours, different times. But either way, they're private. There's no common open space. And every picture you've seen of co-housing has extensive common open space. Yeah. Now, there are a number of things that people think are issues that aren't issues. One is shared laundry. We've had shared laundries in Canberra and elsewhere sort of forever. It's not an issue. You can do that. The other one that people think would be an issue is the minimum size of the unit. The default rules in Canberra for a studio is that 40 square metres is the smallest studio you can build, and everything else is bigger. In practice, as a matter of reality, anyone who can afford to be buying part of a new development is probably going to want more than 40 square metres, and banks won't loan you money for something that's less than 40 square metres. Again, this is something which can be gotten around from a planning point of view. There was a development improved in Woden a couple of years ago. It hasn't actually been built, that had its units that's 27 square metres. And if you can remember the old public housing along Northbourne Avenue, some of that was as small as 17 square metres in a unit. We have had a lot. Our houses have been getting bigger and bigger, and it is possible to build smaller. The problem is I don't think you'll find many people who actually want to be living in those. So here's a few ideas about where we could create co-housing in Canberra. Can it be affordable? That one is probably no, but anyway. Demonstration housing project, as has been mentioned a few times. I have been, as you can saw from my list of things I've been involved in the past, I'm very interested in better housing and communal housing, and there was a motion passed in the Assembly to create the demonstration housing project. And look, I won't speak. If you want to ask me questions, I'll talk more about whether I'm not sure if it turned out to be a good idea, but it has had one small winner. Stelliulato has progressed as far as possible through it. It's had its DA approved, but Stelliulato, look, I rather than describing Stelliulato, which I think I should probably. You should go and talk to Stelliulato, who is sitting over there waving Stelliulato. It's a building which basically, for being RZ, size-wise, was totally legal in RZ1. It's just the idea there might be 3 units in it. Oh my God. Yes, it's just. Now, Watson. As you probably. Yeah, I'll try and go a bit quicker. Sorry, yes. As you may be aware, Co-Housing Canberra put an application in, and we have sort of been told we're going to get a site up in Watson. You can see where it is. It's a little bit north of Epic. Now, We have heard nothing from them for months. Literally less than 24 hours from now ago, I got an email from them with a sort of vague timetable of when things might happen, and we put our expression of interest in 4 years ago. I have no idea whether this is really going to happen, but if you are interested in Watson, I'll put the word Watson over on that whiteboard and we'll try and get in contact. Work with a developer. I was going to talk more about that, but we've just had a developer talk about that for half an hour, so I won't. I'll just say that I'm also part of a development in Eltham, and we're using a development manager called Property Collectives, and we're using very much the same sort of process and legal arrangements that George was talking about. That's a picture of us there, all smiling away, and we are utilising an existing dwelling. You can, of course, buy, sell a site and do a new build, which effectively is what will happen with Watson if it does happen. There are new sites around. There are old sites trying to get repurposed. They cost a lot of money, though. If the people in Downer get what they're asking for, it'll be about $400,000 per dwelling. You can adapt the existing sites and dwellings. The big issue here is that most of Canberra is RZ1, so you can only have one title on it. But if you're not too concerned about selling it and how you're going to leave, that's not necessarily a problem. As well as Green's planning spokesperson, I was Green's senior spokesperson. I have seen a few instances of significant financial elder abuse from having elders providing their property or providing their money for a granny flat and it all going pear-shaped. Other options are things like retro suburbia, the book's over there, and transition towns. So here's just some pretty pictures in Canberra. Using an existing development, that's the Pines. It's pretty close to a co-housing development in many ways. Now, the other shining light possibly is the ACT government is reviewing the territory plan. Draft is to come out in November. Now, anything could happen, literally. That picture is their picture that they're using for their publicity, so that could give us a clue, but we can hope for better. This is from a conversation article. We could green our greyfields. We could redevelop our suburbs to be livable, net zero, intentional, brilliant. I'm happy to take questions, but I fear we've run out of time. I will be around later, although not between 5 and 6 probably, because as being part of another development which is happening, the one thing which we left out is if you want to be part of a co-housing development, you have to be happy to be part of meetings. I'm part of the design circle and we have 3 meetings a week. So thank you muchly.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Such a fountain of knowledge, as are all our speakers. Everybody that I've encountered is so generous with their time. So please, if you have any questions, Caroline or anybody here has always, in my experience, been so willing to answer questions. So please approach people, approach me, give me your email address. We can find ways to answer your questions if you have them.